Hit record. Okay, cool. So, hi everyone. My name's Alejandro Ramirez. I am a graduate student officer for the SACNAS chapter here. And today me and Jake, who is also another graduate student officer here, will be presenting an introductory meeting towards a mentorship program that you are all a part of, or if not, sort of outlining the basics behind what this program will entail. So we're going to briefly explain what SACNAS is, the leadership, introduce the program, list what's expected of you. Is graduate school a right thing for you? Sort of the timeline of the workshops we have set for this year, and we'll go over some details about each lecture. So for those of you who are unacquainted with SACNAS, we'll briefly talk about it. So SACNAS stands for the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans in Science, or SACNAS for short. It's a national organization that has chapter organizations scattered throughout different universities, and it's a organization aimed at trying to foster inclusivity and diversity, as well as professional development in the sciences for underrepresented minorities in those fields. So next I will turn over introductions to some of the officers that are here. So Jake, why don't you please introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. So hey everybody, my name is Jake. I'm a second year biochemistry graduate student at UH. Been an officer since I started at UH back in 2020, so going on 2 years now. I won't go into details of my research because unless people want to hear it, I think we'll keep this short because we have a couple officers in here that are also. Do we want the mentees to introduce themselves too? That are officers?
Sure. It's a small enough group that we can all
Mhm.
introduce each other.
So why don't we start? Yeah, why don't we all just, we have a small group here. Why don't we do introductions with everybody? Let's start with the officers. So we do Jennifer. Jennifer, are you there and able to talk?
Yeah, I can talk. Can y'all hear me? All right. Okay, so I recently graduated from UH this past spring with a degree in biology, and I am an officer with SACNAS. I primarily do outreach with them. Well, I guess I'm technically not an officer anymore because I just graduated, but I'm still helping them out. And I'm currently working with NASA on an internship this summer, and I am looking forward to applying to graduate school in the fall.
Steve-O, I know you're sick, but would you like to just throw in a few words?
Hello. My name is Steven. I'm not an officer anymore either. I'm kind of same boat as Jennifer. What do I say? I used to do research in a lab at UH, but I have since moved on from that. I got a job as a lab tech at BCM, so that's what I'm doing right now. Yeah, that's it.
You really do sound sick. I'm sorry, man. I hope you feel better. All right, why don't we go with Brennan? Is it Brennan?
Yeah, Brennan.
Brennan, you're going to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Brennan. I think you've surmised that much so far. I am a chemistry major. I'm an undergrad. I'm currently doing undergraduate research with Dr. Bergach, studying super hard materials, and I'm hoping to go to grad school for chemistry. I would like to get a PhD and do research. So that's why my Monday night is this. I'm happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. All right, and then last but not, well, we also need to do Alejandro. I think we skipped you technically, but William, you want to say a few words?
Hi, I'm William. I'm a computer science major. I'm currently doing research at Argonne National Lab for an internship, and I'm a senior, and I'm I guess like I'm probably going to, I'm going to be doing graduate school, but I'm going to take a break after undergrad and then go to grad school, I guess, in a couple of years. And so I'm just trying to learn as much as I can for when I eventually do that.
Got it. Yeah, this would actually be beneficial because you can go through and craft some of the materials now, for example, and then a year down the road, if you decide to apply in a year, you can use them then and maybe add on to them depending on what you're doing in that gap year.
Awesome, thanks.
All right, and you just jumped in right at the tail end of the introductions. You did not miss them, so why don't you do us a favor and introduce yourself?
Damn, you're putting me on the spot. Okay. Introductions. Hi, my name is Anne. I am going on to my third year. I'm a biotechnology major. I also work in Kelleher Lab researching on transposable elements with Drosophila.
And Anne is also a officer of SACNAS. All right, Alejandro, I know you did like a brief introduction, but did you want to say anything else?
I mean, I could tell people about myself. So, I guess I wrapped up my third year. So I'm a PhD in physics, doing experimental astroparticle physics in Dr. Renshaw's lab, as well as doing sort of detector-based physics for positron emission tomography. So that's what I do. All right, so with that out of the way, we will move on to what exactly this program is. So the primary goal of this program is to help undergraduate students or people who are planning to go into graduate school pursue a STEM degree by helping them in the application process. Now, the reason why this is so important is because sometimes the application process for a graduate program can be quite quite hard, and there's a lot of things that go into it, a lot of nuances that you have to think about, and especially if you want to apply to multiple different programs, which is something that people do. On average, I think people apply to like 7, maybe 10 programs for their graduate degrees. And so the program is going to span between several months, so between now and until like January 2023, where we're looking at maybe hosting like mock interviews to help people just in general who are just looking to practice doing interviews, because sometimes during the graduate admissions process, they'll ask for an interview from the program you're applying to, and you know, there's certain things you got to know about when doing interviews at these programs. So we'll try to help you out as best we can when the time comes. So each month we'll have sort of like a meeting / lecture where we'll discuss various aspects of the graduate application for all the mentees. If we have any mentors here, the meetings are not required for mentors, but it's required for the mentees because it's a lot of important information will be disseminated. And in addition to the program, we will be pairing undergraduate mentees with a graduate student as best we can to the specified research interests of the mentee and the graduate student. So that's what the pairing process has been trying to do, is to pair two people who have similar interests within the same field. So, and the mentors will be there guiding you in developing your application, or if you aren't applying this year, you can just sort of ask your mentor questions and they'll just sort of be like a general guide and be someone there you can just talk to and just spitball ideas if that's what you're there. And so what's expected of you as an undergraduate mentee? So please show up to the general meetings. The lecture series are once per month. We try to schedule them in such a way that that they don't interfere with a lot of things, but if they do interfere, please do let us know and we'll see if we can try to work something out. Try to maintain contact with your mentor. It's really important that you maintain asynchronous. It doesn't matter how you maintain contact. If your mode of contact is like through some chat message, through email, Discord, Slack, whatever it is, so long as you maintain contact with them, it's fine. If for some whatever reason you lose contact with your mentor and you haven't been able to reach them, please reach out to us and we'll see if we can try to resolve the situation. You can, so there's our Gmail if you need to contact us, as well as our Discord if you're not in our Discord server. That is the fastest way to reach us, but we are also very responsive on our Gmail should you prefer the email route. So I want to sort of take the time to make sure that you have sort of the appropriate reasons for going to graduate school. So there are reasons to go to graduate programs and there are reasons not to do it. So one of the main reasons why you might want to do a PhD or a graduate degree is because you are quite interested in the field of your interest. So typically speaking, with a bachelor's, you won't be able to do much research other than say like a technician position. But if you want to do like more in-depth research and that's very specific that you really have a vested interest in, then maybe a PhD is sort of your best route into it. And a lot of research positions do require a PhD to enter, whether that's government, lab, or in private sector. And so that brings us to a second point. You want to conduct research in a lab. More often than not, they're going to require a PhD for that. You want to do academia, you want to be a professor? Well, PhD is also required for that. Are you a person that wants to advance the field of science? Well, PhDs are people who are at the frontier of science and they constantly advance the fundamental science through their research. So, or if you're looking for something that's intellectually challenging or to increase your financial prospects, although this shouldn't be the only reason why you're going to grad school, which brings us to the reasons against. As a grad student, they give you a stipend. Depending on where the program is, that stipend might be enough to live, or it might not be enough. Say like a program here in Houston offers you like, say, 30,000 a year. And so that might be enough for Houston, but if you were to say get accepted in somewhere like Columbia University and they offer you 30,000, well, that might not be enough for there. So that's something to take into consideration when you're looking to programs is location. Location is very important, not just for climate, but because cost of living, and it varies around the country as well. Also, it's a long-term commitment. The average PhD takes about 5 years. So you have to be sure that when you're doing this PhD, you're not going to have any other, I want to say, time-consuming commitments that'll prevent you from doing your PhD, or the PhD starts hindering your other commitments, because you're not going to do so great if your time is sort of, and your time and attention is kind of split. So that's something you have to consider when doing a PhD. It can also be difficult, stressful, because like I said, with you're at sort of the precipice of science. You're advancing, you're doing things that people haven't done. So that can sometimes be stressful. So that's not to say it's impossible, but it is something to consider. And like I mentioned with point 2, it can interfere with your personal life depending on the workload on the program. So being able to time manage is something you have to really consider. In academia, there's a lot of tenure track positions that don't open up. So you might be, so after like a PhD, you might do what's known as a postdoctorate position, which is basically like a short-term job you do at different places. So that way you gain experience to then apply for an academic position or somewhere else if you feel inclined to leave academia. And you shouldn't go back to a graduate school if you want more school. That shouldn't be the reason why you want to do a PhD, because just prolonging the school experience doesn't really help you in that much. So I want to also take the time to make an important disclaimer, because this is very important. So applications for graduate programs typically end sometime in December, maybe January, but most of them end in December. So let's say if you apply now, like you take the fall semester to make your application materials and you send your applications to programs, they will take the time to review your application sort of like late winter, early spring, and then somewhere around that time in early spring, they'll start sending acceptances, and then you will start your graduate program in fall of 2023 if you were to say start your application now. So that means if you are someone who has just graduated, that means you will have a gap year between your undergraduate and your graduate degree. So that's a very important distinction. So if you say you're a junior last spring, this past spring, and you become a senior this incoming fall, you will have no gap year between your graduate and undergraduate degrees. So it's very important that you all understand sort of how the application cycle works and sort of help you plan out if you are going to have a gap year, what you're going to do during that gap year, and if not, also plan ahead in case you were expecting a gap year, but you're only just going to have the summer between undergraduate and graduate for people who are going to become seniors this coming fall. And so before I turn it over to my colleague Jake, I want to briefly talk about the schedule that we have set for you. So here we have a little timeline. We'll send out a flyer that contains a little more details about this, but we're right here at June 6th, program introduction. And then next month on July 8th, we're going to be talking about selecting graduate programs, reaching out to professors, and a standardized test that still exists somehow, the GRE. And just to give you a brief explanation, the GRE is basically like the SAT, but for graduate level related things. But there are some differences, and which Jake will probably get into when he talks a little bit more about details. And then after that, we're going to in August, we're going to talk about application materials for admissions and maybe start compiling them or start getting a list of what you need. And then September 9th, we're going to have some graduate students come in and talk about their experience during graduate school. And then the next couple months, we're going to have what's known as office hours. So if you, for whatever reason, have a question or you need help with something, we will open up a meeting so that way you can come in and we can just sort of workshop things around, help you edit things or answer any questions you might have. And this is here just to help you sort of like finalize your applications, or if you're not applying to grad school but you still have like a general question, you could just sort of pop on in and just ask us anyway. If there is a type of topic you would like us to discuss that isn't listed on here, please do feel free to reach out and we can try to see if we can maybe like squeeze it into our timeline, because there is a topic about sort of like graduate applications that I haven't really touched on, and that is graduate fellowships. So I'm not sure if everyone is aware about STEM graduate programs, but here in the United States, a STEM graduate program is funded. That means you are not going to pay out of pocket for the tuition, and the universities, like I mentioned in earlier slides, are going to pay you a stipend that's supposed to cover your living expenses while you are pursuing your PhD. So if you didn't know that, I just want to make sure everyone knew, because when I applied to grad school, I didn't know that that was a thing. I thought I would have to pay out of pocket, but no, that's not the case for STEM programs. So graduate fellowships are another way to get funding for your degree. And the reason why you might want to get funding is because that sort of helps you stand out in the graduate degree process, and you can still apply for them while you're a graduate student, so you don't have to worry about applying for them now. So, and with that, I will
Can I
turn it
add
over.
something to that as well?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'd also want to point out, I think a big benefit to getting a fellowship is not only, I guess, to stand out on a CV, but also typically in graduate school, if you're not funded through a fellowship, you're either going to be a teaching assistant or you might be funded by your PI as a research assistant. That's all going to be dependent on funding, right? So me, for example, my PI doesn't really have the excess funds to, fund a research assistant, like basically to fund me out of pocket. So I have to be a teaching assistant. I have to take a class and TA a class. Alejandro, though, since he is an NSF fellow, he is funded by basically, I think it's the government, right? The NSF
Yeah.
is through the government. Yeah, he's
Mhm.
funded basically by the government. He doesn't have the TA. That's a huge benefit. You can spend more time in your research, and it's also like you have a lot of freedom as well. It's less like, well, your PI is funding you, so you have to for sure say like my PI says, you know, is what goes. It gives you a little more freedom to work on the project you want to work on, right? And there's also some added benefits to where the stipends are higher sometimes, where the UH stipend is around 25,000, give or take, not including the whole like tuition waive, which does not go to your pocket, but they kind of include that in your pay. So you do have to pay taxes on it technically. Alejandro, for example, I don't think you'd mind me saying this, Alejandro, that the NSF makes, I think it's 34,000, right?
Yeah.
So he's getting about $9,000 more a year. So those are a couple other benefits to the fellowships. If you guys want, we can discuss those more in depth sometime throughout here. There's a few that I would personally recommend. But yeah, so I just want to throw in that additional information.
Thank you. All right. Now I'll turn it over to you, Jake.
Okay, thank you. All right, so my job here is basically going to be to cover the monthly lectures and the meeting series as we're going to be going over. So if we want to go and advance to the next slide, Alejandro. So after this meeting, our next meeting is not going to be till July 8th, right? So that's going to be at 5 p.m. And the primary topics are going to be choosing graduate programs, choosing a PI, and as well as we will discuss the GRE. Choosing a graduate program is a little bit of a tricky process. Departments will basically place like different programs inside different departments. So like here at UH, for example, on biochemistry, right? Well, UH, I'm technically in biology and biochemistry, but there were other programs I applied to where biochemistry was under chemistry, biochemistry was under life sciences. So it's very dependent. So we'll discuss a little bit of those. Some factors to consider to like what Alejandro was saying, like location, lab productivity. We'll talk about like research groups, how to like look through research groups and choose professors to reach out to, because it's very, very important to contact potential PIs. It's always kind of useful to get that foot in the door before applying to programs. That way you do actually stand out, because sometimes these PIs will actually be on the admissions committees, right? The GRE, still, as far as I'm aware, is still a necessary evil. That said, a lot of programs have been doing away with it. So you're going to need to do some research on your own once you figure out what schools you apply to see if you need to take the GRE. GRE is a weird test. It's a dumb test. I will even say that. I took it myself. The way it's structured is there are two sections. There's a quantitative, I think it's quantitative, which is math, and then there's a verbal, which is basically like English and like literature, right? And then there's also like a writing as well, which I don't remember if they nest that under the verbal. So we'll talk about, there are very specific ways to study for the GRE. The easiest way, and we'll talk about it, is basically doing practice problems, because all of the questions are structured the same way. There are also program specific GREs. So there is a chemistry GRE, for example. I believe there's a math GRE. I might be wrong there, but there's a couple different like program specific GREs. So we can talk about those as well. Let's go and advance to the next slide. Okay, so the next meeting is going to be August 12th, 2022 at 5 p.m. This is going to be a bit of a bulky meeting. So we're going to be discussing your application materials. So how to craft a statement of purpose, a personal statement, a resume, and a CV. What's the difference between the two as well? Because there is a difference between the two. And a big one, because at this point you need to start asking for letters of recommendation, right? We'll cover how to like approach professors by asking for letters of recommendation, who to ask. We can give you recommendations on who to ask. So for example, if you do research, if you've done research in the past, might be a good professor to ask. If you did really well in a class, might be a good professor to ask, et cetera, et cetera. Good ways to keep track of your application materials. I know that sounds kind of asinine, but it can be very easy to get your materials mixed up. I can actually tell you there was a student at my undergrad, he was a year before me. He ended up submitting the wrong letter or like statement of purpose to a school. So the whole thing was geared towards the wrong school because he wasn't organizing his materials well enough. And surprise, surprise, he didn't hear anything back and he got rejected from that school. So once you get these like things sent in, they're in. So like we'll discuss like how to organize them. We'll cover graduate admissions interviews a little bit. We'll touch base on those. And like previously mentioned, CVs and resumes are big. CVs specifically, I know are used more commonly than resumes, but CVs will show these admissions committees like your experience in a snapshot. So it's very, very important to have a good structured CV that's showing all of your research experience, publications, degrees, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so it's going to push on the next. Okay, so the third meeting is something a little different that we haven't done. We're doing it for the first time this year. It's going to be a graduate Q&A, and that's going to take place on September 9th at 2 p.m. So our plan is to get students from the various disciplines, so maybe one from biology, one from chemistry, one from physics, one from math, you know, kind of like that sort of aspects, like the different aspects, and have them talk about a couple different topics, specifically maybe their experiences, the culture of the programs, any advice, because I can tell you, I'm going into my third year, there are things that I would have already done differently. So I'm sure other students feel the same way. It's very important to kind of get these pieces of advice before you yourself advance into these programs. Let's move on to the next slide. So October 7th, November 11th, and then December 2nd are all going to take place at 5 p.m. These are going to be optional. You will be able to come in. We can check up on your application materials. You can ask, we'll ask you like drafting process, how's it going? Do you have any questions? Do you have any help and concerns? The December meeting will also be the final checkup. And by this time, you should have already submitted some of your applications, more than likely, or you're very close to submitting your applications. And we can also begin prepping for your mock interviews if you want to do those. So those are going to be a little more informal, like we did them last year where we had students come in, we would edit their stuff with them right there, right? So let's go ahead and move on to the next. And then January 2023 are mock interviews. So we'll set a date for each specific person, depending on scheduling, and we'll have a couple different graduate students volunteer to help. And these mock interviews will kind of help you practice, right? Because practicing for a mock interview is gonna be like practicing for a job interview. The more you do it, the better you're going to be. Because these questions are going to mimic kind of like the questions the committee and faculty are going to ask you. And it also practices your first impressions, because first impressions are honestly paramount. Because once you get to an interview, you kind of proven yourself that you're kind of in the last batch, but you still need that final push, right? All right, and let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Last and not least, if you guys want to get involved and if you're a little more interested in the organization, we've included a mailing list QR code and a QR code to join the Discord. I highly recommend you guys join the Discord. It is very active. We advertise a lot of opportunities, a lot of social events. We're a very close-knit community. For anyone who isn't, I think maybe everyone but Tho and Brennan are already in the Discord. So you two, I would recommend joining. It's a great community. We do like field trips as well every month. So if you want to just get out and meet people, a lot of cool people in the organization. So highly recommend. Gaming as well. If you guys are into PC gaming, a lot of people just jump in and, you know, play video games. So really cool community. Recommend getting involved. And if you want to, you know, get involved in some of the outreach programs we do, we're always looking for people to do that too. And I think the next slide is the final slide, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. All right. So guys, thank you. You know, it's a quick meeting this week. There's not a whole lot to go over. Does anyone have any questions before we end here? Any comments, concerns? Okay, I will take the resounding silence as everyone is completely okay and we understand everything that's going on. And if any other questions do come up, if you guys do join the Discord, you can always just ping one of us on Discord because we're all there. And if any questions arise, or if you have any issues, you can email us on Gmail. If anyone's having issues with the mentors we've assigned them, also just let us know. Like, because that's something that we need to hear from you guys. Like, if you're having problems getting in contact with them, because we don't know unless you tell us. So if you're having issues on that front, let us know. We do have some backup mentors that if you've tried to contact your mentor and you just can't get a hold of them, and we can't get a hold of them either, we can always pair you with someone else. So yeah, Alejandro, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think that's everything. If
Okay.
no one has any questions, I can just stop the recording.